Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two Hugh Grant enthusiasts watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question: is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? I'm Diggory Waite, and I'm joined as always by my colleague and fellow Hugh Grant obsessive Oscar Beardmore Gray. Oscar, how the bloody hell are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing good, Diggs. You went full sort of Radio 4 there for a bit until the very end when you went back sort of 5 Live.
Yeah, I feel like some people before have accused us of pre-recording that intro bit because I say the same thing every time. So I think when starting with the hello rather than the hello, I think that shows people that
we're real.
Exactly, we're real. We do it different every time. This is off the cuff. This is like theatre. Anything can fucking happen. I could collapse on stage and die. How are you doing, Oscar? You all right?
I'm all right, mate. Yeah, not much going on. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm the same. It's funny as well because, as we said last episode, we've finished Hugh Grant's filmography for the moment. Obviously, we've got a film on the way, and yet I'm still Hugh Grant mad. And
the fire's still burning, isn't it?
It still burns bright, and it's funny that one of my phrases, ladies and gentlemen, I've recently been chirping a young lady. I'm courting a young woman, and one of the issues with that is that it's really quite intense. Early on, and we're all up in each other's business 24/7, and it's all intense. And I keep saying to myself, the candles that burn the brightest burn the quickest. It's an intense feeling, it's an intense emotion, but I'm worried that means it dies out quicker. That has not been the case with Hugh Grant. This candle could not be burning brighter, and yet it's yet to burn out. Even when we finish his filmography, I'm still like, right, what about the old TV shows? And I'm loving it. I'm having a great time.
Out of interest, Diggs, I mean, you don't have to share this, but does your new lady friend listen to the pod? Will she be listening to this and worrying?
Mate, it's so funny. I on our first date, she basically we were reminiscing about our first date the other day. Our first date, by the way, this is what I mean, was probably 2.5 weeks ago, and yet we're already at the stage of like reminiscing about it. But she was reminiscing, and she was like, "Yeah, it was nice meeting you. Like, you were this nice guy. You clearly you were a bit nervous, and within seconds you'd asked if I'd like to see your t-shirt, which you were wearing underneath a jumper. You tried to lift up your jumper to show me the t-shirt, and so you just lifted up your t-shirt and your jumper. She just showed me your belly. So she was like, so you liked, so you clearly were very flustered. Then we sat down, and before I could say anything, you were telling me about Hugh Grant and his greatest films, and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds about right." She has basically described our budding relationship as each time we hang out, she finds out something else mental and nerdy about me. Date 1, she found out about Hugh Grant. I think date 2. She found out about the sex podcast with my mum. Date 3, she found out about my Dungeons and Dragons playing.
Well, it's good. It's good that you're like going one step at a time. Otherwise, she might be out the door.
Exactly. She if I just lay this one on at once, she'd be like, "Okay, listen, you're too much of a nerd, and I can't do this." But it's very, very nice. In fact, the other day it was so sweet. She was like, "Oh, you're around to see each other," and I was like, "No, I can't. I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends." And she was like, "Well, I'm so eager to see you. Why don't you come to my house and you do it in my bedroom and I'll just be quiet?" And that's exactly what we did. So I feel like we're already at married couples stage,
Wow.
Which is very sweet. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Maybe at some point she'll sit in on a record of this.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, at what point? I think the ultimate stage of a relationship is surely when you allow her into the room to watch a Hugh Grant film with you.
Wow.
Because that is that's like a bit of a love triangle going on there.
Yeah, it's true. And for me, watching a Hugh Grant film was usually a very, very personal solo experience. That is let's be real, it's a fetish I'm not ready to invite anyone else in on yet. So we'll see about that. Well, I mean, listen, at the moment it's very much me trying to impress her. But if she wants to get in on watching a Hugh Grant film with me, she needs to impress me, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, speaking of being impressed, perhaps we should talk about, is this a film today, or would you call it what is this?
I think this is a film, Diggs. I think it's a film.
Yeah.
And we've been conned into thinking it wasn't a film up until now.
Champagne Charlie, which is, ladies and gentlemen, a 3-hour masterpiece. Let's waste no more time. Let's get a synopsis from Synopsis Simon.
Champagne Charlie, directed by Alan Eastman, written by Robert Jeffrian and Jacqueline Lefebvre, and released as a TV movie in 1989. Amid the turmoil prior to the American Civil War, Charles Heidsieck, played by Hugh Grant, has built a champagne empire across 19th century France and the United States. Along with battling his uncle for control of the vineyard, reluctant French spy Heidsieck must do his best to avoid the Union army attempting to capture and imprison him.
Oscar.
I'm actually buzzing to talk about this.
Yeah, so am I. This is so crazy because we were so worried about this, as we say. We were so worried. What did you think the film was going to be like? What were you worried about in particular?
I was worried about the period drama.
Because what is it, set in like the 1860s or something
like that? I mean, I have to say the length scared me. 3 hours.
Yeah, terrifying.
I guess there was just a feeling that it was going to be similar to something like The Bengali Night or Impromptu. Yeah. I mean, there was some similarities, as we'll get into, with Impromptu.
Of course.
But I mean, what was your feeling and fear, trepidation?
Exactly the same. I mean, this is I was just worried that it was just this low budget film about some French champagne merchant, and I just thought it would just have no fun to it, but also I thought it was going to be really talky, and there was going to be nothing really going on. Essentially, I thought it was going to be lots of talking in rooms in sets and just really boring. It's so mental how far from that this film is. Like the film starts and it's this Champagne Charlie guy as a kid, and his dad's this amazing champagne maker or whatever, and they're trying to impress that guy who opens the champagne that this little Hugh Grant is holding with a fucking sword.
Hold the bottle up, Magic.
Majesty, please.
Everyone's loving it.
You thought he was going to cut his head off.
Yeah, exactly. You could have cut his head off, and then he just he didn't just pours the champagne out and takes a sip, and you're like, isn't there loads of glass in there now? Isn't there shards of glass in your champagne from where you cut the top off it with a fucking sword? Anyway, that's kind of your classic opening. Then we see Hugh Grant, aka Champagne Charlie, a little bit older, and I guess this is where I ask you the classic question, Oscar. What did you think of Hugh Grant's look in this film?
Well, I mean, the film is split into 2 parts. That's why we were wondering whether it was going to be a TV film. There's basically, I think, obviously it was one of those where it was shown on a Thursday night and then the following Thursday.
Yeah.
It had the second half. The
Exactly.
first half, he is. I mean, I don't know. I can't even put it into words, Diggs. I mean, he's very best, isn't he?
Heavenly. Just heavenly.
I just don't know how they get his hair to stay in that position. Do they? They must put think Hugh Grant for when he's in a funeral, and then times that by 10. He's got slightly longer hair, but it's all curled back, curtainy, and they must put super glue in that shit.
Yeah, exactly, or something, because it seems to always just fall in the perfect way. The way that's always going to make you, as soon as you see it, every scene, he'll just look a certain way and his hair falls and I just go, oh, and I can't help it. That noise just comes out of me. I'm like, oh, it's so good. And in this first scene, firstly, he's looking incredible, but also he's in the bar chirping a couple of birds. He's just like flirting away with his champagne. And I was like, yo, hang on a minute. What film am I watching here? I'm really into this already. It feels like the perfect Hugh Grant film.
Here I have something very special for us.
What is it? Champagne! I've drunk that stuff before.
My father always used to say that champagne is the only wine that makes a woman more beautiful after she is drunk.
Marianne is ready for a drink.
What? And then next thing we know, it's like Les Miserables style, and he's like...
As soon as they shut the door of this bar, it's like pandemonium on the streets, Les Mis style, like you say. Like
he's at the barricades, like fighting the French army, and he like literally like takes on 3 people with bayonets and just like beats them up, and then kisses
them in the face,
and then
kisses the girl,
and then kisses the girl.
Let go!
Are you all right?
Yes, thank you. To whom am I indebted?
Charles, Heidsieck.
Like the champagne?
Like the champagne.
And they say American politics is wild and woolly.
Have you seen enough?
I surely have.
Let's go.
It's completely mental. It reminded me of the other TV movie he was in, The Lady and the Highwayman, where Hugh Grant essentially played... Yeah, Hugh Grant played a... Tudor era Batman or Zorro, and he was like, killing everyone and beating the shit out of them there. Like, it was mental. And so this film, like, it's like, what were we, like 10, 15 minutes in? I'm like, what is going on? Like, it's all over the place. Like, you've got action set pieces, you've got Hugh Grant looking dashing, being flirting with people. We haven't even mentioned his fucking accent yet.
Diggs, this is a disaster.
God.
You put...
Oh, God. It's actually just so sad.
Yeah, you put this, like, unbelievably good-looking bloke in these amazing clothes, and then he opens his mouth, and you just want to cry.
It's so sad. It's so sad. Because the thing is, it's not sexy. And it's not good. If he's trying to do a French accent, I don't think that's what that is. I don't think that's what a French accent sounds like when they're trying to speak English. And also, what's weird is there's other characters in this film who I believe are supposed to be French who don't speak with a French accent. Just make him British. Just make him sound like he normally does, but then every now and then get him to throw in an au revoir or a bonjour or a merci. That's the way that you should play this. Don't, for God's sake, let Hugh Grant do an accent, because unfortunately, Hugh, I'm so sorry, mate. This is bad. It's very, very bad.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen him do a Scottish accent, and we've seen him do the East Ender London accent, and he's good at those two.
Yeah, that is very true. Very true.
Let him loose with those two. But there's a reason why this French accent will never be coming back, because he also did a very similar rendition in Impromptu, which was also an absolute disaster. And
terrible.
It is the downside on Hugh's character in this film, isn't it? Because really, he also like doesn't keep it up. It
falters.
It falters in and out, and you're like, oh, he just sounded like Hugh Grant actually sounds like that.
Like you say, the few moments where every now and then it's like when he doesn't have much to say. Like when he says thank you, it just sounds English. It just sounds like the posh gentleman that we know and love. And also the thing that I don't like about the accent is I think because it's so shit and it's so like it's kind of weird. It makes him seem meek. And it makes him seem sort of frail, which kind of worked in Impromptu. He was meant to play this sort of like, little meek character who's just wants to make music and he's scared of women. That guy, that was great and it worked there. But in this, like, we've just seen him take on 3 soldiers and whack them in the face and then grab this girl and kiss her.
Exactly. And he's like part of like the French aristocracy. Like, this guy is a powerful heir to a champagne empire. And you're so
he's
right.
A confident guy.
Yeah, he's getting all the ladies, and it makes it less believable, doesn't it? Because he seems frail and weak.
Exactly.
But at the same time, after you get used to it, you just kind of roll with it. Like a 3-hour film, you're like, all right, Hugh's playing a weird French guy who doesn't really sound French. We'll just. It is what it is.
I don't want to see you in the fields with these people ever again.
They are people, not animals. They want to have some pride in what they're doing. But then what would you know about that? You don't give a damn about the wine. You'd be happy making colored water if it turned a profit.
How dare you?
Every woman in this film, much like everyone watching it, throws themselves at Hugh. Like, it's unbelievable. Even, and I have to be honest, it's a bit fucked up. Even his mum in the film is really weirdly sexual with him. She's like, oh, Charles. And she's like holding on to him. You know when you do a hug and it's nice? And then she just sort of keeps her hand lingering on his pectoral muscle and just starts, and she's just rubbing it. And it's just really that kind of thing where it's like, right, you've looked at your son in this film too long now. This is getting weird. And then also there's a bit where Hugh goes up to this girl who he's referred to as his little sister, who he then is like, oh, I'm going to give you can do your own personal piano recital for me. And you're like, hang on, I thought you guys were meant to be like essentially brother and sister. And then they get married and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is mental. And then this other woman who's just working with him just looks over and she's like, you get a bit of me. And she just throws herself at him. The thing is, it all makes complete sense. It is Hugh Grant, but just it is also a bit like, is there a woman who doesn't want to have sex with him in this film? Even his mum seems to, which is mental.
Yes, it is strange. I mean, perhaps we should talk a little bit about the story. I mean, so what happens is that Hugh falls in love with this American girl called Pauline. And Pauline is a very attractive young lady, and but she goes to America and marries some old bloke. But Hugh wants to sell champagne in the Americas, so he hops over there, and then they kind of reacquaint. An odd little fact about the person who plays Pauline, who I believe her name is Megan Gallagher. She actually plays Meghan Markle's mum in Suits.
Really? Wow. Yeah. So she hasn't done bad for herself. I'm not gonna lie. Every actor I've seen her in this, I was like, well, they probably never did much else after this.
Yeah.
But that's quite a big role. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, she hasn't done a whole lot else, but I just thought that was kind of entertaining.
That is very fair. Yeah, and that actually is a good point about this film, is that I found myself actually quite intrigued by the relationships in it. You know, he really likes Pauline. She's like, don't worry, we've had this love affair. I'm going to go to America. Maybe one day we'll be together. And then he learns of her marrying this new guy. Then Hugh is like, right, I'm going to marry this girl who's essentially my sister. Bit fucked up and mental. And I remember thinking, this is crazy, but that's the point. And of course, that he's just done it just to do it, you know.
I think you land on a good point there, Diggs. That this film was strangely watchable. Like there was a lot of tension and excitement in it, where I was kind of thinking that I was going to be sitting there and really getting quite bored and, you know, scrolling on my phone and stuff. But I was actually really engaged in this, and I was like, this is actually really good. I mean, I don't know what you thought. I actually thought that the first hour and a half, which is the first film, was a lot better than the second half. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, I did like the second half of the second film for reasons I'm sure we'll go into. I mean, obviously, it was quite mental, but there's a few things about that actually I think are redeeming qualities of it and were quite interesting. But I think probably as well, for us as Hugh Grant fans, another reason as to why the second half was worse is because of Hugh Grant's face.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a bit.
It's rather unfortunate that he's gone all Clive Durham on us.
Yes, yes, done, hasn't he?
Essentially, just like in the film Morris, Hugh Grant grows a hideous moustache. Which he doesn't seem to cut off at any point after that, and it's really quite horrible actually, and I really wish he wouldn't.
You know what's just bad about it is that it just looks like someone has gone down to like the party shop, got themselves a stick-on moustache, and gone. Whoop.
Yeah, perfect. We'll put this on. Well, hey,
it doesn't look real.
No, it doesn't look real. And Hugh Grant has this wonderful young face. And actually, there's another thing about this film. He's topless quite a bit. And he's got quite a like young boyish body. It's like very slim, not too muscular,
smallest
but like
nipples.
Yeah, smallest nipples, kind of like mine actually. It's getting a bit weird. But it's something that, like, in my head, I'm like, how is that attractive? But you know, with the rise of Pete Davidson and Timothy Chalamet and shit like that, like this fucking soft boy simp is really in right now. So let's just earmark that and say, ladies and gents, check it out. Hugh Grant, topless, but like still skinny, soft boy look, class. Anyway. This moustache doesn't suit that vibe, and don't get me wrong, I can vibe with a moustache big time. And I'm sure there's a lot of my Australian friends out there is a big thing in Australia at the moment. They're like, oh yeah, boys with moustaches, great, you know, and mullets and all that shit. That's like apparently the pog look over there in Australia. Don't get me wrong, I can get on board with it, but I can't get on board with it on Hugh Grant's face. His young, beautiful face just doesn't suit a moustache. It's horrible.
Now, what I can get behind, though, is Hugh Grant with a beard.
That is different. That is different gravy, mate. I love that.
This is a unique Hugh Grant look that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
Basically, towards the end of the film, he gets chucked in prison. It's actually quite mental. Like, they're in Louisiana, and it's kind of at the point of civil war down there. And Hugh's like riding a horse a lot as well, which is pretty cool. Like,
that is sick.
Yeah, he's like riding this like big, like, you know, 18-hand horse. He's riding around, and he gets himself in a bit of trouble and sort of gets arrested and then chucked in this like really quite depressing prison. And it looks like he's effectively been rotting away in this prison for several weeks. And someone comes and like tries to wake him up, and he's like, you know, he's almost like sort of Lazarus or something. Like he's just
yes, yeah.
He's got this really thick beard, mangy beard thing going on. I loved it.
It looks sick. He looks like he could be like you know, like the master of a dojo, you know, or something like that, or like, you know, like what he'd look great with that beard and a man bun. And like he looks so sick. Yeah, mate, and you're so right. That is it's a look we haven't seen. The closest I guess we've got is in The Gentleman, when he has like, you know, a bit of a beard going on, but nothing as bushy and as big as in that.
Well, I mean, it threw me off almost as much as like seeing him as a cannibal in Cloud Atlas.
Yeah. That was alarming. That was a lot to take in.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted. Oh, the podcast show.
You mentioned Louisiana there, and I think that's something I really want to talk to you about with this film, is that, so there's like, I guess some sort of like French Revolution going on, then Champagne Charlie goes to America, and there's the American Civil War is starting. And I found this really, I just had no idea that's where this film was going to go. And actually, it's all a bit mental, a bit crazy, but it's such a fascinating representation of that. Because Hugh Grant is really fancies this girl Pauline, and Pauline is from the South. She owns a plantation and she has slaves. And it was really weird because, how do I put this? She sort of like backs up the fact she's got slaves. She's like, they're part of my family. I've grown up with these people. Like, it's all what it is. And you know, the North are trying to take that away from me. And the film doesn't really
question that.
It doesn't really question that. It doesn't have too much of a go at that. I think Charlie, Hugh Grant, quite right, is a bit like, yeah, you know, this isn't cool.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
But what's so interesting is he still loves her, and he's still going to go after her despite that shortcoming. What did you make of that whole thing?
Yeah, it is an interesting point of tension, and I think you're right. Like, it was something that was chucked in there that wasn't really challenged, but it was interesting in the fact that I'd never really thought about it from that perspective. Like, and I can imagine that actually a lot of people felt that way in the South. Like, these plantation owners actually felt like, you know, the slaves are kind of part of their family and stuff. I mean, I really don't know the history well enough to sort of comment on that kind of stuff, but. Yeah, it was strange, wasn't it? Because she ended up being kind of like a spy for the South, and she really seemed to hate the North. And it was an interesting history lesson in some ways. Like, I don't know a lot about, like, you know, the American Civil War, and it kind of, I guess, reinforced some of that tension between like the South and the kind of Yankees as they were referred to in this film.
But it's so interesting because then they do have this scene where Hugh Grant is walking through this in the South where they're selling slaves, and it's horrible. And the scene is like really quite
graphic.
It's graphic and it's really quite upsetting, genuinely. Like, you know, I'm a big boy, but I was like, it's weird. And also because this film has up to this point it's all been a bit slapstick and a bit silly. And then that scene is a bit like, oh, fuck, this is really dark. So, but what I think is so good, because obviously owning slaves, there's no justification for it, whatever she thinks. Like, she might say that, and that, you know, that she, of course, feels as so whatever, but, you know, there's no justification for it. And Hugh Grant knows in that moment when he's in this, they're selling them and stuff, it's the worst thing in the world. Like he knows it's bad, but I think what's so interesting is that he still kind of loves her regardless, and that's where the point of tension comes. So
it kind of shows that are you trying to say that it sort of shows that even if people have weird views or done bad things, like if that love is there, it doesn't really matter. Kind of, and I think like at least Hugh's character still is like, well, she's still a good person or whatever, or like it's not the end of the world. And it's interesting because obviously the Confederacy, like the guys who are wearing the grey and stuff, usually are depicted as like the worst of the worst, whereas in this film it's like, well, she's fighting with them, and it's not actually really presented as worst of the worst, and the Unionists are like the heroes. In this film, Hugh Grant is captured by the Unionists, who seem also like bastards. You know, the guys who are fighting for Andrew Lincoln. We've been watching too many Hugh Grant films. Andrew Lincoln just holding up the signs, being like, Christmas, being like, fight for me. That would be a great. Someone's got to make a meme out of that. You know, comes into the Champagne Charlie with like his little signs.
Yeah, exactly. Andrew Lincoln's there, but Abraham Lincoln, you know, and but these guys, so they capture Hugh Grant because he's been in the South trying to find Pauline and all that sort of shit. They capture him. And they treat him awfully. Like, they beat him up. They also shoot him in the arm. And then they wake him up and they go,
"On your feet, Mr. Heidsieck."
Good morning, General.
Got something to show you.
And they go, "Look at this." And they go and show her some of Pauline's family, who they've shot and killed. And they're like,
Friends of yours, I believe.
So the Unionists, who are meant to be these amazing emancipators, are also presented in this film as bastards. And it's just I just found that like a really potentially like grown-up look at this, where it's like both sets of people, obviously the people fighting for, you know, in favour of slavery are terrible. The people who are fighting against slavery are better, but both of them within the war context are bad and horrible. And just war is bad, and it brings out the worst in people. And I was suddenly sat there thinking, Jesus Christ, is this film like
an Oscar-winning?
Yeah, Oscar. But it's like, this is really making me think, and it's really like actually giving, like, it's making some really like maybe not, I don't know, like adult points. It's like it's really giving me some food for thought. And I thought it was really well done. I thought it was really, really clever, and how Charles is just a guy caught up in all of it. You know,
yeah, he's definitely cool. And then there's that still quite poignant scene at the end where, you know, almost like Hugh eventually realizes for himself that Pauline isn't the woman for him, and it's almost like actually Pauline's character, what we've been shown on screen, is almost like a bit of a front. Like, she shows this other side to herself where she kind of like calls him a traitor, and perhaps that goes to your point, Diggs, about war. Like, it sort of brings out the worst in people, and she And you know, and it's kind of like that realization for Champagne Charlie that you know, actually he's better off back home with his champagne and his wife and kid than he is chasing this kind of, you know, love interest that he's had for a long time. He's got herself in a bit of a sticky spot. Yeah. And then we sort of have that kind of final like meeting at the end with his kids and stuff, and it sort of feels like stability is finally, after 3 hours.
Yeah. 3
we
long
finally
hours.
got to a point where, like, you know, happily ever after situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. And again, it's such an interesting ending, because Pauline could be like, okay, you know, the Confederacy's losing the war, I'm not going to get my plantation and my slaves anymore, but she's still willing to fight on. Like you say, Hugh's like, nah, this is ridiculous now. Like, I love you, but you now our values and our things are too far apart. So then you're right, he goes home and he goes back to his wife, who was the girl he didn't really love, but he ended up getting with. And then the film ends, and it's sort of like a happy ending. And you're sort of like, okay, interesting. Because the woman he clearly loves is Pauline. But has he just been like, well, she's obviously batshit mad, and she's a bitch. So I'm now going to go and just settle. Yeah. And settling is like a good ending, which just doesn't fit with the sort of Hollywood narrative of, oh no, love should win out, and love is always the winner. Yeah. Whereas this just feels like
it didn't.
Maybe he does love, or maybe this film is saying you can love two people at once, and he does actually love this first girl. He's loved them both, and he's just now picked one.
Yeah, I mean that could well be the sort of like final point of the film, because something I hadn't picked up on is that Champagne Charlie's mum was in love with his uncle.
Oh, the evil one.
Yeah, the evil one, apparently.
Fuck. Oh, so, Jesus Christ.
There was two levels of this like love triangle kind of, you know, love is who do you really love, and like who should you really like, all this kind of stuff going on. But Diggs, I love that analysis. It's really got me sort of thinking more deeply about this.
But it's just like, and that's the thing. And so when this film ended, I was just like, holy shit! In amongst everything that's going on, there's actually just so much like relationship-y stuff that I've really clung to, because this Champagne Charlie guy exists. This is obviously not, a lot of it's fucking bullshit, but a lot of this is like based on a true story. Like this guy existed. He sold champagne in the US when the Civil War was kicking off. He was like, fuck, I need to get my money because shit's kicking off. He went to try and get his money in the South. A lot of them couldn't pay it. They wanted to pay in cotton instead, blah, blah, blah. He was captured by these. All of that's true stuff. So you could easily make a sort of biopic about all that boring shit. Whereas what they did was they rooted it in relationships, and they presented the war dynamic in a really interesting way where sort of both sides were bad and Charles was just in the middle of it. And I came out of the film just being like, shit, this was really quite good. This was quite cool.
So Diggs, when you're on your next date, are you gonna start off the conversation by saying, so my love for you is a bit like Champagne Charlie's love for Pauline?
It's actually really, really funny you say that. This is so. Now I feel like I have to say this. So I went on a date a few weeks back because I've been on the scene, probably less so now with this latest one, and I went on a date with someone. And we got on really, really, really well. We got on really well, and I really enjoyed the date. However, and so that was like me and Pauline, like Hugh Grant and Pauline, you know, like loving it, having a great time with each other. However, Pauline's love for the Confederacy and you know, not wanting to abolish slavery, perhaps. You know, yeah. Anyway, one of the worst things that the modern world has ever seen, and it was kind of like this girl and me. She was that I was on a date with, was going really well. Really liked her. She was an anti-vaxxer, quite a staunch anti-vaxxer. Didn't really believe in COVID, and I at first when we were talking about it, I thought she was kidding, and so I kept joking about it. And after a while, I was like, oh my God. So at the end of the date, when she was like, so am I going to see you again? How do you think it went? I was like, I don't think so. I don't think so. Much like Hugh Grant, I was like, I've got a woman back home who I'm going to go and see instead. So there you go. Sometimes your values win out. So I have more similarities with Hugh Grant's filmography than I care to admit usually.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
Oscar. Champagne Charlie, 1989. Are we taking Hugh for granted?
You know, Diggs, when I finished the film and before we came on to record, my answer was always going to be no. But now I am further convinced that it is no.
Yeah.
Hugh Grant hasn't given many interviews about this particular movie, but he did say in an interview in 1989 that I play the archetypal hero, I hit people in the face, I rescue pretty girls, they fall in love with me, I'm a man, I'm charming, all the things I wanted to be. It's a very nice role, really.
I mean, that's perfect.
He's basically hit the nail.
Summed it up.
He has summed it up in a nutshell, and I think he was, apart from the accent, let's be real, the accent was horrible.
Yeah.
It was awful.
It was bad.
But if you can get past the accent, he looks amazing. The script is good. The script is good, and for a 3-hour film, I've watched worse 3-hour films in my life. I can tell you that. For
Cloud
free.
Atlas.
Yeah, exactly. This is 1,000,000 times better than Cloud Atlas.
Yeah.
So for that reason, yeah, we're not taking you for granted, Diggs.
I love that. That should be on when they re-release this as a DVD. When this podcast goes viral, and everyone's like, "Oh shit, yeah, maybe we should watch that." When this fucking it will be on it. It will just say Oscar Biltmore Grave taking you for granted says better than Cloud Atlas. Do you know what? There was part of me that was sat there going like, right. Before this film ended, I was thinking to myself, I really hope that Oscar didn't like this film, because there was part of me that was like, surely we can't both like this like straight to TV movie, whatever sort of thing. But the more I've talked about it with you, the more, and by the time I actually got to the end, I was like, fuck it, this film has not been taking you for granted. It is just it's too bloody good. Let's just like look, Hugh Grant looks amazing with the outfits. He's in amazing settings. Like there's a cast of crazy weird characters and all this mad stuff going on. Like the thing is, it's very like camp and over the top at points and stuff. But like that's just great fun. And actually, like you said, it was intensely watchable and really actually got me thinking. It was really really
poignant,
really poignant. Exactly. And again, there was a moment again that stuck to me. There's a bit when the Unionists, have found Hugh Grant. They've showed him Pauline's friend's dead bodies, and they say, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And they're laughing at him. And Hugh Grant whacks this Unionist in the face, like he does. Like, I'm a man, I'm charming, I'm Hugh Grant. It's what I ever wanted to be. He whacks this guy in the face, and this Unionist soldier is like, "Argh!" And he sticks his gun in Hugh Grant's gut, and Hugh Grant doesn't fucking waver, because I think Hugh Grant's thinking, "Fuck it, I think Pauline's dead. What have I got to live for?" Just like Hugh Grant in that scene, I'd take a fucking bullet for this film. It's that good. It's that fucking good.
Yes, I love that.
It's that fucking good, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how surprised I am.
I'm going to say maybe it's the low expectations that's got us so buzzing here, but I'm going to also be really intrigued where this falls in our leaderboard.
Yes.
I think this is going to be, this is like a mid-table kind of, this is like a Tottenham Hotspur kind of, it's not, it's quite Spursy. It's not. Maybe this is a niche reference for probably too niche a reference for our Hugh Grant fans out there. But it's solid mid-table.
Yeah, exactly. It's maybe not going to push it. It could be a bit of a dark horse though.
Yeah,
it could be like slightly sneaking into the upper half. Well, we'll have to see. But as I say, like I was so dreading watching this film. That's why we've known it's been on YouTube for ages, but I've just kept putting it off. But I'm so glad we watched it.
There it is. And you can go and watch it on YouTube yourself. And it had 300,000 views.
Yeah, imagine. Oh my God. And some people are loving it. What I remember as well, someone said, "Oh, I saw Hugh Grant in 4 Weddings and a Funeral and on Notting Hill. I didn't think he was a very good actor until I saw this film. Then I realised what." And I was like, "Sorry, what? Sorry, what? What are you talking about?" And then I got to the end of the film and I was like, yeah, there were a few moments where actually Hugh's like the bit where he was going to take a bullet and shit like that. I was like, maybe the accent really throws me off, but there are a few moments where I'm like, maybe Hugh Grant has done really well with what he's been given. It is a TV movie. It is like the script, is weird in points, but like, fuck it, this is a good film. I'm serious.
Yes.
There you go. Well, wow. What fun. Oh my God.
Exciting. So exciting.
So exciting. If the next few episodes of this program and the next few films and TV shows we see are as good as that, then this is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm so bloody excited about Hugh Grant. Even though we've seen all his films, I'm like, he's the gift that keeps on giving. What is going on? How am I still discovering shit of his? I'm like, this is so good.
Yes. It's just mental how many of these weird, wacky things he did. It shows you what you have to do, really, actually, to make it as an actor. Like, you've got to pick up these weird, wacky roles. I mean, this is, he was the main part for 3 hours here, but it's still weird.
It's still really weird. It's still really, really weird. But you're so right. He really put in the graft, and it shows now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the journey keeps on going. The roller coaster keeps on rolling. stay in touch and join us. Make sure wherever you're listening to this right now, you're subscribed, you're following, or whatever. Follow us on Instagram at Taking Hugh for Granted. Same again on Facebook. We're at Taking Hugh on Twitter. You'll be first to know about when an episode drops or any Hugh Grant news drops, because we've got a new film coming out on the way. Operation Fortune, Rose de Guerre. The Guy Ritchie film is coming out in mid-March, so keep abreast of that. I'm sure there's loads of other stuff that will happen as well, so make sure you're following. Until then, thank you so much for listening, thanks for getting this far, and au revoir.
Au revoir.
Taking Hugh for Granted is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray. The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.